Hi everyone, we're going to continue with our domain Eukarya, moving on to the kingdom of Plantae, or plants. So in the marine ecosystem, there are only about 200 species of plants, which is significantly smaller than what we would think about as land plants. And because of this, we think about all of those algae that we talked about last time as being plants, but that's not true. They are protists. So let's differentiate between those protists and these plants. One thing I do want to mention though is that these plants have a really challenge in the ocean dealing with those high salt levels, which normally would dehydrate plants, so they had to adapt to those different circumstances. Another circumstance that they might have to adapt to, low light in some places, also being submerged in water consistently could also be another challenge for these plants. So these are all different things that these plants had to overcome to survive in the marine ecosystem. So the plants that we're going to look at today fall into two different groups, submergent plants and emergent plants. So our submergent plants are going to be what we think of submergent, submarine. They're going to be entirely under the water. And for the most part, this is going to consist of different types of sea grasses. So they form underwater meadows in mostly shallow waters, because if they're going to be entirely underwater, we need to have some light source for them to produce, to do photosynthesis. So you're going to find these sea grasses in nice shallow waters. They're good homes for juvenile fish, crustaceans, and other animals, and we're also going to see a lot of animals going to feed on these seagrasses as well. Some examples might be a manatee or a green sea turtle. What I do want to point out here is that these seagrasses are anchored into the soil. So that's a big differentiation between marine plants and those algae or protists that we talked about last time, or that these are anchored in some fashion into the soil because these plants need to receive nutrients from that soil. So let's take a look at what our seagrasses look like. Should be pretty familiar to you. Kind of looks like grass in your backyard. So we can see that we have different lengths here, show some of the sand at the bottom of the ocean, and it really just provides that ecosystem and that extra food source for some of these animals. So next we're going to look at some of our emergent marine plants. So emergent means they emerge from the water. So they have underwater roots, but the plants grow above the surface of the water. So mangrove trees is a really great example. We've talked quite a bit about mangrove forests and mangrove trees there. But what's so awesome about these mangrove trees is this tangled root system, again, are going to provide shelter for a lot of juvenile animals within the oceans. And also just the tops of the trees provide a really interesting ecosystem for a connection between the ocean and the land. One thing I do want to point out again here is that mangrove trees have a root system. So again, the difference between these plants and the algae that we talked about last time is going to be that root system, because plants need to get some of those nutrients that they can't just get from the water. So they have to anchor themselves into the soil and gather those nutrients from the soil itself. So again, we can take a look at our mangrove trees or any aquatic trees that you might find on the edge here. You can see these intricate root systems, very, very long, very deep, that are allowing for those different shelters for those animals. And then this intricate up top system here that allow marine birds to have really nice sites here. It also allows other animals who may live on the land next to these mangrove swamps to have shelter and shade in the water as well. So that's where we're going to end for today. Tomorrow we're going to continue and start talking about some of the animals that you might see in these kingdoms. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know.